Years Caesar was afraid. He would never admit it. He did not write it in his memoirs. But he knew. The man who did this was called Gaius Julius Caesar. And this is the story of the craziest battle ever fought in the history of Rome. Alesia, 52 before Christ. For 8 years, Caesar had conquered Gaul piece by piece. Imagine this, a Roman general, the greatest of his time, surrounded by 80,000 Romans trapped between two enemy armies, 330,000 Gauls approaching from every direction, no way out. And what does this general do? He builds a wall. Not to protect himself. No. The Gauls united 40 tribes that had hated each other for generations. 40 peoples that had spent centuries. Rome believed that Gaul was finished, tamed, broken. Rome was wrong. Because that year, a young king who had done what no one believed possible. His name was Vercingetorix. And for the first time in 8, tribe by tribe, massacre after massacre, 1 million Gauls dead, another million reduced to slavery. Then he builds another wall facing outward to protect himself from the other army. And he locks himself in the middle, massacring one another. 40 nations that had never agreed on anything. They united under one man. He was not massacring enemies who hated each other. This time he was facing all of Gaul, 330,000. A man who was Rome Gaius Julius Caesar, 48 years old. Bailed. A name that the Romans would learn to fear. A name that meant great king of warriors. And a name that would die. This time was different. This time he was not fighting divided tribes. He was not conquering isolated villages. Caesar believed he was invincible, and that arrogance had led him into a trap. On the other side, Gaul and a man who had warriors, the greatest army that Gaul had ever assembled, and they were coming for him. But before understanding how, it was a cruel plan. It meant that the Gauls would burn their own homes, kill their own livestock. Caesar won the impossible. You must understand who was the man who almost destroyed him. Vercingetorix, destroy everything they possessed. But it was the only plan that could work. And for a moment, Caesar had another weapon more dangerous than his legions. His mind. He saw things that others did not see. Like a lion's mane, mustaches descending beyond the chin, a golden torque around his neck. The symbol. He did not give the enemy time to think. He struck fast, brutal, and that mistake cost him everything. To understand the mistake of Vercingetorix, for the first time in 8 years, Caesar was losing, but then Vercingetorix made a mistake. One single mistake. He had seen the ashes of his father and had decided to try anyway. Because he had understood something that no other, he would not fight Caesar in open battle. The Romans were too disciplined, too organized. An island that the Romans believed was legend. He had killed 1 million people, reduced another million to chains. Roman in history. He had crossed the Rhine where no Roman had ever dared to go. He had crossed the sea toward Britain. The Gauls had burned him alive for this. Vercingetorix had seen what happened to those who tried to unite Gaul. He found solutions where others saw only death. He turned disasters into victories. But that mind had a flaw: arrogance. Done the impossible. Vercingetorix, young, perhaps 28 years old. Tall, long hair. Vercingetorix was the son of a king. His father had tried to unite the Gallic tribes 1 generation earlier. And that machine ground anyone who stood in front of it. The Gauls were fierce warriors. Individually, they were scorched earth. Let Caesar march through a desert. Let his men die of hunger. Let winter do what swords could not do. As he had done for 8 years, United, they had a chance. One single chance. And Vercingetorix knew exactly, but he was the most dangerous general the world had ever seen. In 8 years, he had conquered more territory than any strangled in a Roman cell. But this is the end of the story. First comes the war. On one side, Rome. He would starve Caesar, burn the crops, poison the wells, and he had never lost a battle. Never. Caesar did not fight like other generals. He did not wait. He did not hesitate. Left. They advanced together, struck together, killed together. A Gallic warrior charged. It worked. Caesar found himself in difficulty, his supply lines cut, his men hungry. Was perfect. The Romans were unbeatable in open battle. It was not opinion. It was a perfect war machine that the ancient world had ever seen. Every legionary knew exactly where to stand. Exactly when to strike. Exactly how to move with his companions. They were not warriors, they were gears in a machine. Not because he was kind, he was not, but because he always won. And so they charged forward without coordination, seeking single combat against the legion, but they fought as individuals. Every warrior sought personal glory. Every man wanted. For months, Vercingetorix had carried out his plan perfectly. He had burned 20 Gallic cities with his own hands. Probably better fighters than the Romans, stronger, bigger, armed with long, and 3 gladii stabbed him simultaneously. This happened thousands of times in every battle. Gaul had understood. Divided they would die one by one. Caesar would massacre them tribe by tribe. Only way to beat Rome was not to fight it, but to starve it. The Romans could defeat any army. A steep hill in the middle of a valley. Solid walls. 80,000 Gauls. The grain? His army was no longer hungry. And now he was hunting Vercingetorix. But the gift had one last plan. 20 cities full of Gauls, burned to deny food to the Romans. The tribes had cried. They had protested. Some had called him crazy, but they had obeyed. And Caesar was dying slowly. Caesar arrived with his legions and looked. His generals assessed the situation. We cannot assault it. Too steep. A beautiful Gallic city, rich, full of grain, full of everything the Romans needed. Vercingetorix. The Romans did not seek duels. They fought like a wall, shield against shield. We would lose half the army on the walls. We cannot bypass it. Vercingetorix would come out and hit us from behind. 1,000 Gauls behind, trapped. His generals told him the truth. We must leave. We cannot win again. What Vercingetorix did not know was that he was walking into the wrong trap. His Alesia was a natural fortress. For 8 years, Vercingetorix had seen tribe after tribe crash against that wall and die. He had understood that the tribe said no. Not this one. This is too beautiful. Too precious. It was his mistake. Gaius took it. Massacred every inhabitant. The tribes we have subdued will rebel. Gaul will be lost, and I will be finished in Rome. The generals understood. A final trap. He retreated to a fortress on a hill, Alesia, and waited for Caesar to follow him. This is the final battle. If we win here, Gaul is free forever. If we lose, His scouts had warned him. In a few weeks, he would find himself with Vercingetorix in front. In 200, retreat toward the Allied province. We will fight next year. It was wise advice. Rational advice. Caesar said, but they could not fight hunger. They could not fight winter. They could not fight nothingness. 250,000 warriors were marching toward Alesia. The relief army, Caesar knew, we must besiege. Starve them. Caesar nodded. Besiege. The only option, if we retreat now, we lose everything. 8 years of conquests, 1 million dead. For nothing. Vercingetorix had sent messengers before locking himself in Alesia. Messengers to... This was not only about Gaul. Caesar had enemies in Rome. Powerful enemies. If he returned defeated, sharpened branches intertwined so densely that no one could cross them. Then came the lilies' hidden pits in the ground. And they closed the gates. They did not kill them. They did not welcome them. They left them there between the Roman... Something crazy. We will build a wall around Alesia. We will keep them trapped. But for the relief army, we will build another wall facing outward to stop them. Silence. The generals stared at him. You want to trap yourself between enemy armies on purpose, yes. With 330,000 enemies in total, 21 kilometers facing outward to stop the relief army, 40 kilometers total. But the walls were only the beginning. In front of the walls, they dug other trenches, 5 rows of ditches full of hidden in the grass, designed to pierce feet. Any army that tried to cross that death zone would lose half of its men. At night, they dug trenches 3 meters deep. They filled some with water by diverting nearby rivers. What the Romans built at Alesia had no precedent in military history. 2 rings of fortifications. We are dead, but if we are protected by a wall, we can keep them out. And if we keep them out while they built earthen walls 4 meters high with wooden palisades on top, with guard towers every 80 feet. If the walls did not hold, they all died. But this did not change the decision. The Romans began to dig Vercingetorix from getting out. The second, called contrabellation, surrounded the first wall. Them 8 rows of lilies. Then came the stimuli pieces of wood with iron hooks stuck in the ground. One meter deep, with a sharpened stake in the center, covered with branches and earth. Invisible until you stepped on them in 3 weeks. His engineers said it was impossible. Caesar said do it anyway. He was burying him alive. Vercingetorix sent a message to the relief army. Come now, before it is too late. Then what do we do? Asked a general. Caesar smiled. That smile his men knew. The smile that meant he was about to do. The first, called circumvallation, completely surrounded Alesia, 18 kilometers of walls facing inward to prevent. Yes, it is madness. Caesar stopped smiling. It is the only chance if the relief army attacks Vercingetorix. But when? And if the walls do not hold, Caesar did not answer. He did not need to answer. Start of the siege. 250,000 Gallic warriors. The greatest army that Gaul had ever, before even reaching the walls. Vercingetorix watched from the walls of Alesia. He saw the Romans working, then he made a desperate decision. He had 80,000 warriors in Alesia, but also civilians. All the civilians, women, children, elderly were driven out of the city, sent toward the Roman lines. The Romans watched them arrive, women with children in their arms, old people dragging their feet, old people, mouths to feed with food that was running out. Vercingetorix ordered the expulsion. He saw the fortifications growing, and he understood what was happening. Caesar was not just besieging him. They would destroy him politically, perhaps physically. This battle was for Gaul, but it was also for Caesar's survival. The hope was that Caesar would welcome them, feed them, that he would waste his supplies. Caesar did not do it. his golden helmet visible everywhere. His voice urging his men, "Forward, break them, freedom is on the other side." The stimuli tore feet. The ditches swallowed entire rows of warriors. Stakes piercing legs and bellies. Corpses piling up so fast that the next ones used the bodies as steps. Alesia against the inner walls. The relief army launched its 250,000 against the outer walls. Then Caesar did something that only he would have dared to do. He took the Germanic cavalry, 330,000 warriors, 80,000 Romans in the middle. The noise was indescribable, and you will return home rich. The Gauls attacked from both sides. Vercingetorix launched his 80,000 out of walls and the walls of Alesia. Without food, without water, without shelter. 330,000 men screaming at the same time. The sound of wood shattering, of iron hitting iron, filled the horizon. Their war trumpets, the carnices with dragon heads, howled through the valley. Both armies, this was the siege of Alesia, and it was about to get worse. The relief army arrived 1 month after the. For hours, the battle remained in balance. The Romans barely held on with their nails. Then, at sunset, today we are surrounded, but today we will show the barbarians what it means to be Roman. Hold the walls. The Romans on the parapets hurled pila, heavy javelins that pierced shields and bodies. Caesar rode along the lines, his red cloak visible to all, his voice reaching every ear. Today we fight of bones breaking. The Gauls charged through the death zone. The lilies massacred them, men falling screaming. His fiercest mercenaries kept in reserve and sent them out of the fortifications, not against the Gauls in the breach. The Romans on the outer walls watched them arrive and understood that they could all die that day. Tried to climb, but the Gauls kept coming. On the inner front, Vercingetorix led the assault personally. Wheatfield, we are surrounded. The Romans are behind us, treason. It was not true. The Germanic horsemen were a few. On the outer front, the relief army struck like an infinite wave. Caesar rode between the two fronts. Collapsed under the assault. Thousands of Gauls poured through the breach. For a moment, it seemed that all was lost. Wherever there was a crisis, he appeared the red cloak. The calm voice, hold, just one more moment. For every Gaul who fell, 10 took his place. They reached the walls and the real massacre began. But against the rear of the relief army, 10,000 Germanic horsemen struck the Gauls from behind. The weakest point gave way, a stretch of the northern wall, built in haste on unstable ground. The Romans were on defense. The Romans were fighting for survival. How could they attack? But the Germanic horsemen, 1,000 against 250,000. But in the chaos of battle, who could count, who could think? One who united a people and died in chains. Both changed history. Were there. Real. Lethal. Charging through the rear lines of the relief army. The panic began slowly, and everything changed. The Gauls did not expect an attack from behind. How could they? The Romans, who could do anything but run? The relief army disintegrated, not defeated, dissolved. 250,000 men. First in the rear, men turning and seeing horses and swords where they should not be. Then it spread like fire in a became master of the world. Then died, stabbed 23 stabs at the feet of a statue of his enemy Pompey. Rome will never die. In the name of Alesia, the impossible battle will echo for eternity. His warriors saw him look and stop fighting. Not all together first, some, then others, then all, alone. Rode slowly towards Caesar, who was waiting for him seated on a podium. Then he did something that no one expected. Who died strangled after 6 years of waiting. Because as long as someone tells these stories, intact, impassable, and made his last decision. The next day, a messenger came out of Alesia, massacred them, but most simply disappeared into the night. On the inner front, Vercingetorix saw everything, years. The language, the culture, the roads, the cities, everything became Roman. In 46 before Christ, Caesar celebrated his triumph, the greatest military parade that Rome had ever seen. Then he dismounted, threw his weapons at Caesar's feet, took off his armor, and he rode in a circle around Caesar, slowly in silence, like a last gesture of defiance or perhaps of homage. Exposed like an animal, at the end of the triumph, he was taken to an underground cell and strangled, who became 250,000 terrified individuals running in every direction. The Romans pursued them, waited for the end. Vercingetorix looked at his men hungry, defeated, without hope. The assault stopped not by an order, not by a defeat in combat, but by despair. He saw the army that was supposed to save him turn into a fleeing crowd. He saw his last hope die. Their king stood on the walls looking at nothing. A man threw his shield, then another, then hundreds, then thousands. The king who had almost destroyed Caesar, the man who had united Gaul, the warrior who had made Rome tremble, is different. Vercingetorix wore his most beautiful armor, mounted his best horse, came out of the gates of Alesia. If this story struck you, leave a like, subscribe so you do not miss the next stories of Rome. Rome itself, 4 years after Alesia, he crossed the Rubicon, started a civil war, defeated. Vercingetorix was dragged through the streets in chains in front of crowds that screamed insults. What should they do? For whom should they die? The relief army was gone. The supplies were finished. Some say that Vercingetorix came out on foot in silence and surrendered without words. But the most widespread version, Vercingetorix asked to speak. Caesar accepted. What happened next is told in different ways. At Alesia, no trace remained. And Caesar used the glory of Alesia to conquer something greater than Gaul. Died alone in the dark with the hands of an executioner around his neck. Gaul became Roman for the next 500. The great king of warriors was finished. Caesar looked at him for a long moment, then ordered him to be put in chains. Vercingetorix remained in prison for 6 years. 6 years in a dark cell under Rome, waiting. But this is another story. The story of Alesia ends with 2 men, one who built an impossible trap and one an empire. Vercingetorix asked to speak. Caesar accepted. What happened next is told in different ways. Comment what impressed you the most: the madness of Caesar who trapped himself to win, or the tragedy of Vercingetorix.